Political theory operates on two levels: the descriptive science of how governments actually function, and the prescriptive philosophy of how they ought to function. The crucial role of this philosophy is its critical function. Theorists construct idealized societies to evaluate existing beliefs and expose flaws in the status quo. This method of critical evaluation began in earnest with Plato, emerging from the social and political turmoil of ancient Greece. Plato directed his most severe philosophical critique at the system governing his home city-state, Athenian democracy. Classical Greek democracy was built on equal participation among free men. It relied on arriving at public decisions through open debate, majority rule, and the active involvement of the many. Plato argued that this system possessed a structural defect. He believed the general public lacked the rigorous education and intellectual discipline required to select wise rulers or navigate complex policy. Because the masses were easily swayed, the democratic process rewarded trickery, pandering, and the gift of eloquence over actual competence. To Plato, this ensured that manipulative demagogues would capture public office. They would flatter the voters to secure power, ultimately steering the state into ruin to serve their own interests. Plato concluded that democracy was an irrational, chaotic system, inherently destined to implode from its own internal contradictions. To solve the Athenian crisis, Plato established a radical objective. He set out to engineer a perfectly stable, corruption-proof society. He sought to replace the erratic shifts of the democratic mob with a system built on rigid, immutable logic. For Plato, achieving absolute stability meant the total abandonment of democratic equality. This creates a sharp tension in modern political science. The society Plato designed as a utopian cure to instability is viewed by contemporary scholars through a much darker lens. Modern theorists identify Plato's blueprint for a just state as the foundational architecture for the closed, totalitarian society. To understand how this ideal state transforms into an engine of oppression, we must first deconstruct Plato's radical definition of justice from the ground up. When we hear the word justice today, we usually think of fairness or individual rights, but the definition has evolved significantly since antiquity. On the left of this blueprint is the modern concept of substantive justice, defined by the allocation of goods, rights, and opportunities to all citizens. The goal is to transform society to protect the underprivileged and ensure equality. Contrast that with Plato's traditional concept of justice on the right. Here, the focus shifts away from rights and toward fixed societal roles. Plato explicitly defined justice as the power of individual concentration on duty. In this framework, a just person is simply one who performs the specific duties attached to their assigned status. They do not demand equality, they fulfill their function. For Plato, a just social order only exists when each element in society performs its appropriate task, and performs it well. This requires a strict negative constraint. Every citizen must perform their assigned task, and only that task, never interfering with the work of others. Platonic justice replaces the idea of fairness with a system of perfect functional specialization and absolute compliance to a preconceived order. This definition of justice dictates the physical, hierarchical structure of Plato's ideal state. The foundational layer is the producer class, containing the industrial forces of the city, responsible for agriculture, industry, and material production. While they possess the city's economic power, their political restriction is absolute. They must never be allowed to rule. Above them is the warrior class. Their designated function is military defense and the physical protection of the city-state. They hold the coercive force and the weaponry. Yet, like the producers, they are strictly barred from governing. At the apex are the philosopher kings. Their qualification is intellectual. They alone possess true knowledge, science, and philosophical reason. Because they embody reason, they alone are entrusted with the reins of government. Platonic harmony is achieved only when the reason of the top tier dictates the tiers below. There is absolutely no upward mobility. A logistical question remains: how does a state enforce this rigid inequality without sparking a violent rebellion from the lower classes? Plato proposed a controversial enforcement mechanism, a manufactured foundational myth known as the noble lie. The citizenry must be taught that the gods forged different humans using distinct metals within their souls. The myth maps directly to the class structure. Iron and brass represent the producers, silver the warriors, and gold the rulers. This story is designed to make extreme social stratification appear natural, divine, and unquestionable. By locking individuals into their tiers from birth, the noble lie effectively eliminates the concept of social mobility. The noble lie serves as the psychological glue of the Republic, holding the structure together by framing political subjugation as a moral duty. For much of history, the Republic was studied with philosophical admiration. But the 20th century brought a much harsher evaluation of Plato's perfect state. In 1945, the philosopher Karl Popper published a scathing critique titled The Open Society and Its Enemies. Popper argued that Plato was not a savior of governance, but a false prophet who provided the philosophical justification for tyranny. Popper reclassified the noble lie as state-sanctioned propaganda used to pacify a population and justify inequality. He viewed Platonic justice as a rhetorical device used to enforce a hierarchy where the individual is entirely subordinate to the state. Maintaining such a system requires the total suppression of free speech, equal rights, and critical deliberation. When stripped of its ancient prestige, Plato's theoretical utopia reveals the core mechanics of a closed, oppressive society. Plato set out to solve the very real problems of Athenian democracy: its chaos, its incompetence, and its susceptibility to demagogues. But the cost of his solution was the destruction of the very thing it sought to protect. In his attempt to eliminate political instability and human error, Plato eliminated human liberty. Without the messy, unpredictable churn of democracy and the right of the people to question their rulers, the state becomes a stagnant prison. This is the ultimate paradox of political theory. The uncompromising quest to engineer absolute political perfection is the fastest route to a totalitarian nightmare.